Imagine spending 20 years trying to save lives and accidentally inventing whiskey, not beer, not wine, whiskey, one of the most famous alcoholic drinks in human history. And the people responsible weren't rebellious outlaws, they weren't kings, they weren't master distillers, they were monks. Men who had dedicated their lives to discipline, self-control, and getting closer to God. Which makes this story incredibly awkward, because it begins with a group of holy men trying to create medicine and ends with smugglers running illegal whiskey operations through the mountains somewhere along the way. Things got completely out of hand, and the strangest part, nobody meant for any of this to happen. Now, we don't know the name of the monk who helped start this story. History lost that information centuries ago, but somebody like him almost certainly existed. So let's call him Brother Aidan. Brother Aidan lived in a monastery during the Middle Ages. His life was simple: wake up, pray, work, study, sleep, repeat. Not exactly the lifestyle you'd associate with whiskey, but monasteries were different from what most people imagine. They weren't just places of worship, they were also centers of learning. While much of Europe struggled through war, disease, and chaos, monks were preserving books, studying plants, recording observations, and experimenting with ideas. In many ways, monasteries functioned like medieval research labs, and Brother Aidan loved learning. There was just one problem. People kept getting sick, a lot. Diseases swept through villages, infections killed thousands, and medicine was painfully limited. Therefore, monks became obsessed with finding better remedies, and that obsession eventually led Brother Aidan to a strange machine, a machine that looked suspiciously like wizardry. The device was called a still. Its job was simple: heat liquid, capture vapor, cool vapor, collect the result. Easy. But if you'd never seen distillation before, it looked like magic. Liquid vanished into steam, then somehow returned as something completely different. Imagine showing a smartphone to someone from the year 1100. That's roughly how impressive this seemed. Brother Aidan became fascinated. The more he experimented, the more possibilities he saw. The still could concentrate herbs, extract flavors, create stronger medicines. At least that was the plan. Then one day somebody asked a question, a very dangerous question. What happens if we put our fermented barley brew into the still? History would never recover from the answer. Nobody knows who tried it first. But somebody poured fermented grain mash into a still. The liquid heated, the vapor rose, the drops collected. And out came something entirely new, a clear liquid, powerful, burning, and far stronger than anything most people had ever tasted. Now imagine being the first person in history to try it. No warning, no label, no idea what's coming. You take a sip, and suddenly your eyebrows are trying to leave your face. Compared to beer and wine, this stuff felt almost supernatural. The monks were amazed, not because it was fun, because they thought it was medicine. They named it Aqua Vitae, the water of life. And for a while, everything seemed perfectly reasonable. The monks produced it, doctors recommended it, people used it in small amounts for a while. Because the medicine wasn't behaving very medically, the monks believed they had created a healing tonic. The public believed they had discovered something much better. People weren't just drinking it when they were sick. They were drinking it when they were healthy, very healthy, suspiciously healthy, and every year demand grew. The more people tried Aqua Vitae, the more they wanted it. The monks had accidentally created a product that customers were extremely enthusiastic about. Unfortunately, those customers weren't exactly reading the dosage instructions. Soon church leaders began noticing something strange. People seemed far more interested in the drink than in anything the monks had to say, which was awkward. Some church officials praised it, others worried, because the people making the drink were often the same people warning against excess. The spiritual leaders promoting self-control had accidentally created something that encouraged the opposite. Once again, the medicine wasn't behaving very medically, and things were about to get much worse, or much better, depending on who was drinking it. Over time, knowledge of distillation spread across Europe into Ireland and eventually into Scotland. And Scotland turned out to be the perfect place. The climate wasn't great for vineyards, but barley grew beautifully. Therefore, Scottish distillers adapted the process. Instead of focusing on wine-based spirits, they focused on grain. Generation after generation refined the technique, recipes improved, flavors evolved, and slowly the spirit transformed into something new, something we now recognize as whiskey. Even the name carried the monk's legacy. The Gaelic phrase Whisky Beatha means water of life, the exact same idea behind Aqua Vitae. The monks' original vision survived, even as their invention evolved into something far bigger than they ever imagined. As whiskey became more popular, governments noticed something. People loved it, and whenever people love something, governments usually discover a way to tax it. Therefore, whiskey taxes arrived, and distillers hated them. Some taxes became so expensive that producers simply refused to pay, but whiskey wasn't going anywhere. Therefore, an underground whiskey culture exploded. Secret stills appeared in remote valleys, production moved into caves, barrels were hidden in forests, smugglers crossed mountains under the cover of darkness, government agents chased illegal distillers found new hiding places. For centuries, whiskey wasn't just a drink. Sometimes it felt like a crime movie, and that's when the story becomes truly ridiculous. Remember Brother Aiden, the man trying to create medicine? Well, now that medicine was committing tax fraud, history can be weird sometimes. But whiskey's biggest transformation happened completely by accident. Early whiskey wasn't golden, it wasn't smooth, and it definitely wasn't luxurious. Honestly, it was probably pretty rough. Imagine drinking a campfire that was angry at you. But distillers needed a way to transport it. Therefore, they stored it in wooden barrels, simple solution, or so they thought. Something unexpected happened. The spirit changed. The wood softened harsh flavors, added color, created new aromas, and improved the taste dramatically. The longer it sat, the better it became. Nobody planned this. Nobody predicted it. One of whiskey's greatest features was discovered because people needed storage containers. The story of whiskey is basically a series of happy accidents stacked on top of each other. By the modern era, whiskey had become a global phenomenon. Distilleries grew into massive businesses, brands became famous, countries competed over who made the best whiskey. Scotland, Ireland, America, Japan. Everyone wanted a piece of the story. But the craziest part wasn't the competition, it was the price. Remember that rough medicinal liquid the monks once experimented with? Today, some bottles sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars. Others have sold for more than $1 million. Collectors lock them in vaults. Investors treat them like artwork. Entire businesses track whiskey prices. Think about how absurd that is. A medieval medical experiment became a luxury asset at this point. The medicine wasn't behaving medically at all. It had become an investment portfolio, and that's what makes this story so incredible. Brother Aiden probably died believing he'd help create a useful medicine. He never saw the smugglers, he never saw the distilleries, he never saw the global industry, he never saw bottles selling for more than houses, he never saw whiskey become one of the most famous drinks on earth. But all of it started because one curious monk asked a simple question. What happens if we put this into the still, and with that, they accidentally created whiskey?